The sound of rain against my apartment window had become my meditation. For 12 years, it had been the only constant in my life, a steady rhythm that asked nothing of me, judged nothing about me, expected nothing from me. I sat at my small desk in the corner of my one-bedroom apartment in East Vancouver. The glow of my laptop screen reflected off my reading, glasses as my fingers moved across the keys, preparing tax returns for Mrs. Chen from the laundromat downstairs, the Patels at the corner store, and young Marcus, an Uber driver putting himself through UBC. Simple accounts, honest work that left my conscience intact. Even if my bank account didn't, muscle memory doesn't forget, I reminded myself. 12 years ago, I'd been managing billion-dollar portfolios. Now I balanced numbers for ordinary people. But precision stayed with me. Discipline stayed with me. Pride, I thought, was something you carried even after. The world stripped everything else away. The apartment was quiet except for the rain and the occasional creak of the radiator. No music, no television. Silence was honest. It didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. My phone buzzed on the desk. An unknown Toronto number. I almost didn't answer. Spam calls had become routine, but something made me swipe. "Is this Mark Brennan?" A woman's voice. Professional, clipped, businesslike. "Yes," I said cautiously. "I'm Patricia Holbrook, from Ashford and Associates." She continued. "I'm calling regarding the estate of Margaret Brennan." My hand froze. Margaret. The name felt like glass shattering across a hardwood floor. I hadn't heard it aloud in years. I hadn't let myself think of her, I see. "I managed," my voice trailed off. "I'm sorry to inform you that Mrs. Brennan passed away on Tuesday," the lawyer said gently. "The funeral is tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. at Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Toronto. Following the service, there will be a reading of the will at our offices at 4:00. Your presence is requested." The words floated above me, almost unreal. Margaret was dead. The woman I had loved more than my own life. The woman who had walked away, leaving me with shame, regret, and a career ruined under scandal I didn't deserve. I heard the question before. I consciously registered it. "Mr. Brennan, are you still there? Will you be able to attend?" Every instinct told me to decline. What business did I have at Margaret's funeral? I was the disgraced ex-husband, the man publicly humiliated, the one whose face had been splashed across newspapers under the headline, "CFO Mark Brennan charged with embezzlement." They'd used my worst photo, the one where guilt seemed etched into my features, even though I hadn't taken what they said I had, even though justice had eventually moved on. But then something inside me stirred, a stubborn, nagging remnant of the man I had once been. Maybe I owed her that much. Maybe I owed myself. "I'll be there," I heard myself say. I hung up and sat very still, watching the rain streak down the window in irregular streams. Toronto. I hadn't been back in 12 years, and yet, in a single phone call, the past reached out and gripped me by the throat. The next morning, I stared at the packed bag on the edge of my bed. Clothes folded, toiletries stashed, umbrella leaning against the nightstand. I hadn't flown back to Toronto in over a decade. The city had once been my kingdom. Boardrooms, penthouses, late-night dinners with people whose names I could barely remember now. And now it was a place I feared returning to. A city haunted by my past mistakes. My phone buzzed again. A text from my daughter. I hesitated before opening it. Her words were clipped, sharp. "Don't expect anything. That money isn't for you." I let out a slow breath, tasting frustration and regret. She didn't understand. She had grown up with fragments of my failures. Stories filtered through her mother's eyes. Stories that painted me as the villain. And maybe in some ways she was right. Maybe I was. Still, something stubborn in me refused to let her words dictate my actions. I owed this to Margaret, to myself, to the fragments of life I hadn't yet thrown away. The drive to the airport was quiet. Rain had tapered to a drizzle, leaving streets slick and reflective. I watched the city pass, familiar yet foreign. Memories flickered. Margaret laughing over coffee at our tiny kitchen table. The sting of betrayal when our relationship collapsed. The public humiliation that followed like an unshakable shadow. Landing in Toronto felt like stepping into a parallel life. The skyline looked the same, but the air carried ghosts I wasn't ready to meet. I hailed a cab and directed the driver to Mount Pleasant Cemetery. Silence filled the car, save for the low hum of the engine. I stared out the window, rehearsing apologies I'd never fully formed. trying to prepare for a world that had moved on without me. At the cemetery, the rain returned, misting the marble stones. People milled about, faces unfamiliar. Hushed conversations cutting through the wet air. I felt like an intruder in a memory I had no right to enter, and yet, there was a pull I couldn't deny. The funeral was only the beginning. The will reading, Patricia Holbrook had said, would reveal the truth. And even if the world thought I deserved nothing, even if my daughter had already condemned me, there was a part of me that hoped justice, or something resembling it, was still possible. Lingered at the edge of the gathering, watching mourners exchange condolences, masks of grief hiding what they really felt. I remembered Margaret's voice, the curve of her smile, the way she had believed in me even when I failed. Tomorrow, I thought, the past and present would collide. And whatever waited for me in that lawyer's office, I would face it. Before I continue, tell from which place are you watching this story right now? Please subscribe and like the video for motivation. The funeral ended in a blur of muted condolences and umbrellas, dripping onto stone pathways. I lingered for a moment, letting the rain wash some of the tension from my shoulders, though nothing could wash away the weight in my chest. Every step toward the lawyer's office felt heavier, as if the walls themselves remembered my past. As I entered Ashford and Associates, the smell of polished wood and faint coffee greeted me. The receptionist glanced up, eyes polite but calculating, as if measuring whether I belonged. I nodded and made my way to the conference room where the will reading would take place. Patricia Holbrook was already there, reviewing a stack of papers with precise clinical movements. Her eyes met mine briefly, assessing, then returned to the documents. I felt the familiar knot of anxiety and anticipation tighten in my stomach. This was the moment the past collided with the present. Few other attendees sat quietly, murmuring in hushed tones. Lawyers, distant relatives, and the occasional family friend I barely recognized. My daughter wasn't here yet, though I had expected her. That absence carried its own weight. Patricia cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Margaret Brennan." Her voice was calm, but the gravity in the room was undeniable. I straightened in my seat, trying to prepare for whatever awaited me. The reading began with small details, donations to charities, bequests to distant friends, but my attention was only on one line. Anything concerning Mark Brennan. I felt my pulse quicken, my palms grow clammy. Each word Patricia spoke seemed to echo louder than the last, the room narrowing until it existed only as a stage for my past and present, and then it came, to my ex-husband, Mark Brennan. Patricia's voice hesitated, and I leaned forward instinctively. "I leave the entirety of my estate, $185 million, to Mark Brennan. To my daughter, I leave." She paused again, the words tasting like both thunder and relief. "A symbolic token of my love, though the majority of my estate is to be preserved for Mark." The room seemed to tilt. I blinked, unsure if I had heard correctly. My daughter had said I would get nothing, had written me off completely, and yet here it was, in black and white. A whirlwind of emotions hit me at once. Disbelief, relief, guilt, and the faintest spark of vindication. Margaret had chosen me. Despite everything, the years apart, the scandals, the betrayals, she had made a decision that changed everything. I looked around, noticing the stifled expressions on the faces of those present. Some were shocked. Some tried to hide amusement or resentment. My daughter, when she finally arrived, froze in the doorway, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. Her judgment was written clearly on her face. And I realized then this was only the beginning. The money, the inheritance, the past, it all mattered. But the real challenge was facing her, facing myself, and navigating a world where the rules had suddenly shifted. Margaret had left me everything, but what would I do with it? And how would my daughter respond when she realized the truth of her mother's decision? The office was quiet except for the soft shuffle of papers and the occasional cough from someone too polite to leave. My daughter stood near the doorway, arms crossed, jaw tight. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the room, stopping on me with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and something I couldn't quite place, hurt, maybe, or betrayal. I swallowed hard. The words from the will still rang in my ears. The entirety of my estate goes to Mark Brennan. It felt surreal, like stepping into a life I had long thought impossible. And yet, looking at her, I realized that wealth, no matter how vast, came with chains I hadn't anticipated. She spoke first. Her voice was low but controlled, a tremor threatening beneath the surface. "You can't be serious," she said. "Mom." She wouldn't. She didn't mean for this to happen. I shook my head slowly. She did. She made her decision. I didn't. I stopped, realizing that words would only ignite her anger. I let the silence speak instead. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You, after everything, just get it all? After all these years, you waltz in and—" Her voice cracked, betraying the calm she tried to maintain. I wanted to reach for her, to explain, to apologize, but I knew it wouldn't matter yet. This wasn't about me. It was about her feeling robbed, about her perception of justice, and the years she had lived under her mother's guidance, believing I didn't deserve anything. Patricia cleared her throat gently. "Perhaps we should allow some time for reflection. These are complex matters." I nodded, grateful for the interruption. It gave me a moment to breathe, to steady myself. Inside, my mind was racing. 12 years ago, I had lost everything: career, reputation, stability. Now, in one stroke, fate had shifted the balance. And yet, the look on my daughter's face reminded me that money alone could not repair the fractures of time, trust, and emotion. After a few tense minutes, she finally spoke again, quieter this time. "I don't understand why she chose you over me." "Why now?" I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice calm, measured. Margaret knew what she was doing. She made her choice based on love, judgment, what she thought was best. "I can't change that. I can only honor it." She shook her head, spinning away, hands clenching. "Honor it? You don't get it, Dad. You never did. You left. You ruined everything for us." The words cut, sharp and raw, but I held myself together. I had expected anger. I had expected accusations. I hadn't expected the sting of truth so vividly expressed, nor the realization that forgiveness, or even understanding, wouldn't come easily. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of my choices, not just my professional failures, but the personal ones, the ones that shaped my family's perception of me. And now, with Margaret gone, the ledger of life was being tallied, and I was standing at the center of the balance. Uncertain how to proceed, the room fell silent again. My daughter's back was still turned, her small figure rigid with resentment, and I realized something profound. The money, the inheritance, the estate, it was only part of the story. The real journey had just begun. The office felt colder now, though the rain outside had slowed to a drizzle. I could hear distant traffic from the street below, muffled and insignificant compared to the storm inside me. My daughter's presence was heavy in the room, even when she wasn't speaking. Every glance, every stiff posture, reminded me of the chasm that had grown between us over the years, a gap filled with misunderstanding, anger, and the echoes of my past mistakes. I moved toward the window, staring out at the gray Toronto skyline. The city looked familiar, yet distant, like a memory viewed through frosted glass. I had once walked these streets with purpose, ambition, and certainty. Now I walked them burdened by the weight of my own survival, by the ghosts of failures that still whispered in my mind. Margaret's will had shifted everything, but it hadn't erased the past. It hadn't softened the judgment of those who remembered my downfall, nor the resentment my daughter had carried for years. And yet here I was, legally entitled to what she had left me, $185 million, a fortune I had never imagined touching again. The sum was staggering, almost absurd in its magnitude. But the true challenge lay not in the money itself, it lay in navigating the tangled web of family, emotion, and morality that came with it. My daughter finally spoke again, her voice lower now, almost a whisper. I just can't accept this. Mom loved me too. She couldn't. I turned to face her, trying to measure my words, to reach her through the anger and confusion. She did love you, I said softly, and that will doesn't change that. But she made a decision she believed was right. You might not understand it now, but it's her voice speaking to us from beyond this world. She wanted me to have this for a reason. She shook her head, eyes glistening, voice trembling. It's not fair. I grew up thinking you abandoned us, that you left us with nothing but shame, and now you just inherit everything? How am I supposed to live with that? I felt the sting of guilt cut deeper than any scandal, any financial ruin I had endured. She wasn't wrong. She had lived the consequences of my past. And now, despite my intentions, my inheritance was another wound pressed into an already fragile heart. I walked over to her slowly, careful not to crowd, to intimidate. "I didn't come here to take anything from you," I said. "I came because this is what Margaret wanted. And because I want to do right by both of you. That's all I've ever wanted, to make amends where I can, to honor the life she left behind." She looked away, hands twisting at her sides, trying to hold back tears, trying to stay composed. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until I felt the need to act. I pulled a chair over and sat down, signaling that this wasn't a battle I intended to fight with anger. "I know I've failed before," I continued, voice steady, "but I want to start making things right. Not just for me, not just for her memory, but for you. The money, it's complicated, but it doesn't have to drive us apart. We can figure this out together." For a long moment, she didn't respond. I could see the storm in her eyes, the same storm I had felt every day for 12 years, the storm of loss, of confusion, of anger that life had dealt her. And yet, beneath it, I saw the faintest glimmer of something else. Doubt, curiosity, the tiniest crack in the armor of her resentment. Patricia cleared her throat, a subtle reminder that the legal proceedings were not yet over. "Perhaps it would be best if you both took some time to process this," she said gently. "The estate is substantial, and decisions of this nature require care." I nodded, though my attention was entirely on my daughter. She hadn't spoken yet, but I could feel the shift, the slightest acknowledgement that my words had reached her, that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of the conversation. We left the office together, stepping into the drizzle outside. The city seemed different now, less like a place that had humiliated me, and more like a canvas for possibility. I wanted to believe we could rebuild something, not just the relationship between father and daughter, but the sense of trust and understanding that had been lost so long ago. As we walked, I realized the inheritance was more than money. It was a test, a challenge to navigate the tangled web of human emotion, legacy, and forgiveness. And I knew, deep down, that Margaret's final gift wasn't just financial. It was an opportunity to reclaim what had been lost, to finally confront the past, and to prove that despite everything, I could still honor the life she and I had shared. For the first time in 12 years, I felt a flicker of hope, a small, fragile hope, but enough to carry me forward. The days after the will reading blurred together in a haze of paperwork, phone calls, and quiet confrontations. The estate was vast, and managing it was more complex than I had anticipated. Lawyers, accountants, and distant relatives seemed to appear from nowhere, each with questions, opinions, and agendas. Every interaction felt like a test of patience, judgment, and restraint. But none of it compared to the challenge of navigating the storm of emotion sitting across from me at every meal, every conversation. My daughter. She had returned home with me to East Vancouver, ostensibly to talk things through, though neither of us knew exactly what that meant. Her anger simmered just below the surface, like water waiting to boil. She spoke little, but when she did, every word carried the weight of 12 years of disappointment, fear, and misunderstanding. One evening, we sat across from each other at my small kitchen table. The rain tapped rhythmically against the window, a familiar backdrop to the tension in the room. I placed a stack of documents in front of us, estate papers, accounts, and letters from Margaret. I had only just begun to read. "I don't understand why she left it all to you," she said finally, voice trembling. "Why now? Why me, not even a portion? Mom always said she wanted to protect me, to make sure I had everything." I took a deep breath. "She did protect you, and she made this choice for a reason. Not because she wanted to hurt you, but because she trusted me to manage it responsibly. She believed I could do something with it, something lasting, meaningful." Her eyes narrowed. "Meaningful? Dad, you left us. You left me and Mom to deal with everything alone. How can I trust you now?" The words hit harder than any financial loss ever could. I realized that the estate, the money, even Margaret's final decision, all of it meant nothing if I couldn't repair this rift. And yet I also knew that rushing, pleading, or arguing wouldn't work. I had to show her, not just tell her, that I was different now, that I had changed, that I could be trusted. Over the next several days, we began the slow work of rebuilding a fragile connection. Small acts, sharing a meal, discussing practical matters about the estate, even just sitting in silence together became exercises in understanding and restraint. My daughter remained wary, her anger not fully dissipated, but cracks were forming. Moments of vulnerability surfaced. fleeting but real. One afternoon, she confronted me again, more sharply this time. "I just don't get it," she said. "All these years everyone told me you were gone for good, that you didn't care. And now, you're here with all this money, power, authority. How am I supposed to reconcile that with everything I believed?" I leaned forward, locking eyes with her, steady and calm. "I can't change the past, and I can't control what you believed about me. But I can show you that I'm here now, that I want to make things right. And that means involving you, listening to you, making sure you're part of every decision moving forward." For a long moment, she didn't respond. Then, slowly, she lowered her gaze, hands twisting in her lap. I sensed a shift, a hesitancy, a curiosity, the tiniest acknowledgement that perhaps this wasn't the same man she had believed all those years. But the challenge was far from over. Outside pressures loomed, lawyers questioning every transaction, distant relatives whispering about entitlement, and even media scrutiny, a ghost of my former life threatening to resurface. Every decision had to be precise, every action deliberate. One wrong move, and the fragile trust I was beginning to rebuild could shatter completely. And then there was Margaret. Her presence was still felt everywhere, not in spirit but in expectation. Her letters, her carefully detailed instructions, the stipulations in her will, they were reminders that this inheritance wasn't just money. It was a responsibility, a test, a chance to honor her memory by doing right by my daughter, by our family, and by the life she had believed I could lead. That night, after she had gone to her room, I sat alone in the living room, the rain drumming against the window, and allowed myself a moment to reflect. 12 years ago, I had lost everything. Today, I had been given a second chance, not just to reclaim financial security, but to mend relationships, to rebuild trust, and to demonstrate that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal. I realized then that the real inheritance wasn't the money. It was the opportunity, painful, challenging, and uncertain, to prove that I could rise above the mistakes of the past, to face the storm that had haunted my life for so long, and to step into the future with integrity, courage, and hope. Tomorrow, I knew, would bring new challenges. Conversations with my daughter would continue. Decisions about the estate would demand my attention. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew there were still twists, revelations, and tests waiting to unfold. But for the first time in years, I felt ready to face them. Not as the man I had been, but as the man I had become and the father I still hoped to be. The morning sun filtered weakly through the rain-streaked windows, casting pale light over the apartment. The city outside seemed quieter today, almost hesitant, as if it too was holding its breath for what was about to unfold. My daughter had remained in her room most of the night, and I could sense the storm of emotions still churning inside her. I knew that today would determine not just how we moved forward, but whether trust and understanding could truly be rebuilt. She emerged eventually, her posture stiff, face guarded. There was a tension in her eyes, a mixture of anger, grief, and lingering disbelief. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where we had first begun the delicate dance of confrontation and understanding. "I've been thinking," she said slowly, carefully choosing each word. "About everything. About Mom, about you, about the will." Her voice wavered, betraying the vulnerability she tried to hide. I leaned forward, attentive. "Go on," I said softly. She took a deep breath. "I realized Mom trusted you with this for a reason. Maybe it wasn't just the money. Maybe it was about showing us that people can change, that things can be different, that the past doesn't have to dictate everything." I felt a weight lift from my chest, though I remained cautious. "It's not about the money," I said gently. "It's about what we do with it and how we honor her memory. That means honesty, responsibility, and respect for each other." Her eyes softened, but the tension lingered. "I still have questions," she admitted, "about why she made these decisions, why we weren't included sooner. But I want to understand. I want to try." For the first time in years, I felt a bridge forming, fragile but real. I reached across the table, letting my hand hover near hers without pressing. She didn't pull away. Over the next few days, we began to work together, reading Margaret's letters, reviewing her instructions, and planning how the estate would be managed. I involved her in every step, showing her that her opinions mattered, that her voice could shape the future her mother had entrusted to us. There were challenges, Some distant relatives pressed claims, citing technicalities. Legal matters threatened to consume our time and energy. And through it all, my daughter watched me closely, testing, questioning, measuring whether I had truly changed. And then came the moment I had been dreading and anticipating at once, the final conversation, where we would confront not just the past, but the legacy we were meant to carry forward. We sat in the living room, documents spread out between us, and she looked at me, eyes searching. "Dad, I want to say something," she began. "I know I've been harsh. I've held on to a lot of anger, but I see now that you're not the same man I thought you were." Mom's choice. It wasn't about taking from me. It was about trusting you to do the right thing. And I want to trust you too. I swallowed hard, emotion catching in my throat. "That means everything to me," I said quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I will do everything I can to earn it." Every day, we spent the rest of the day talking, planning, and rebuilding. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the streets glistening in the soft light of early afternoon. For the first time in years, the weight of past mistakes felt lighter, not gone entirely, but manageable. The inheritance was no longer just a fortune. It was a responsibility, a bridge, and a chance to redefine the bond between father and daughter. Weeks later, as we finalized legal matters and began distributing the estate according to Margaret's wishes, I realized something profound. The money, the wealth, the legacy, it was never about power or status. It was about connection, trust, and the chance to make right what had once gone so terribly wrong. Daughter and I still had challenges ahead, but we faced them together. And for the first time in 12 years, I felt truly whole, not because of wealth, but because of reconciliation, understanding, and the enduring presence of Margaret's love guiding us forward. As I sat back that evening, watching the sunset reflect on the rain-washed streets, I whispered a silent thank you to the woman who had shaped so much of my life. Margaret had left me a fortune. Yes, but more importantly, she had left me the path to redemption, the chance to reclaim family, and the knowledge that even in the darkest chapters, hope and love could still prevail, and I knew, without a doubt, that we would honor it.